this video, I'll provide an overview for our next part of the research project assignment. In this case, this is part number 2, Descriptive Statistics. And I'll demonstrate how to use Excel for this as well. So in your previous assignment, part 1, you identified a city or region to study, as well as a business purpose or idea that your data could be used for, a particular population of interest, a couple of variables of interest that you'll study, and some secondary sources to help supplement your research. In this assignment, again, you'll be writing a 1 to 2 single-spaced business memo with these items. In the discussion board 6, you spoke with your small group about some issues that might arise from your data, and there's always issues with data. Perhaps the data could be incorrect, or there are blanks, or the information is incomplete, or there might be bias, for instance, and we learned about biases in research in chapter 1. So you want to be aware of all the issues that might impact your research results. This only gives it more credibility in that you've considered all the issues and you found a way to manage them, or at least acknowledge them, so that the reader or the consumer of your information is aware. In part 2 of this assignment, you will develop some descriptive statistics, and this is based on what you learned in chapter 2 and 3. You'll want to calculate some numeric measures based on chapter 3, or perhaps create some charts, which is what you learned how to do in chapter 2. And then in part 3 of the assignment, list some potential business implications based on your initial data. So in the previous assignment, in the proposal, you offered some potential business implications without knowing what your data looks like. Now you can narrow and hone in more now that you've seen some data from your analysis. What might this mean for a business decision maker? So let's look at Excel, and I'm going to pull up my Montreal file again. Now, one thing I might want to do, for instance, after I've cleaned my data and deleted any data that is not relevant to my study. So for instance, one of my variables of interest might be price per night. Now I've got all this data here, and I want to know the numeric measures with it. Now in our chapter 3, we learned how to do it by hand, but since we're working with such a large data set, I strongly recommend that you use Excel to calculate your information. Now in the previous weeks, I provided instructions on how to add the data analysis tool pack. And so when you're in Excel under the Data tab, here on the right, after you've added the Data Analysis Toolpack, this Data Analysis button should appear. If you have not added the Data Analysis Toolpack, whether you have a PC or a Mac, I will provide the instructions again in Canvas so that you can add it into your Excel. Now, if I open up my data analysis, I just click right here, a window will appear that offers all the different types of statistical tools at my disposal. So you can see here we already have descriptive statistics highlighted, but if you didn't, note that the list is in alphabetical order, so anything that we'll be working on in the semester, there's likely a tool in Excel that can do this for you. So I just click on descriptive statistics and click OK, and it's going to ask me what is my input range. I want to analyze my price. So I'll click on the blue button here and go ahead and select all my data. I think I can just select the column, and so it's going to highlight everything in column P for price. And when I hit my blue button, it'll bring me back to my main menu. I will check labels in first row, because as you can see, we do have a label here. It says price, and what that will do is make sure that it does not include this word price in my analysis. I'm going to go ahead and let my descriptive statistics appear on a new worksheet because our file is so large. And so I also want to click Summary Statistics when I hit OK. And so now my descriptive statistics have appeared on another tab. So here we've got our mean calculated for us, and I can actually modify this because I know we're talking about price. So I can change this, for instance, into currency. I'd hit the dollar button right here. And so the mean, or the average nightly price for Airbnb homes in Montreal, is $89.01. Note that all the pricing in the Airbnb file is in US dollars. So you don't have to do any kind of conversion if you're working with a foreign country. We have our standard error. We have a median. Again, we know we're working in dollars, so the median cost per night is $73. And again, the median, it leaves out the extreme low values as well as the extreme high values. We have our mode. So the most common nightly price is $50. We have a standard deviation of about $140.21. So when we talk about how many standard deviations away a value of X is from the mean, we know that the increments are at 140. We have our sample variance. Perhaps you want to know the minimum cost per night and the maximum cost per night. This number right here looks extreme to me, so I'm curious, is this some mansion or very large compound that you can rent per night? But that would allow me to go back into my data and do a quick search and find out, well, what was this really expensive house here? As you can see, we've got the value right here at $95.97, and I can just look that up. And so that's how you could run the data analysis tool pack to get your descriptive statistics pretty readily. So now let's say we want to do some descriptive statistics in terms of a chart, like in Chapter 2. I'm actually curious what kinds of beds are available in Montreal, so I might want to do a pie chart by bed type. So I'll go ahead and go here to my column O. And so a nice trick that will let me select all my data without having to drag my mouse all the way down is to hold Control, Shift, and push the down arrow on your keyboard. So now you can see I've just selected all my data values in column O down to the 6,827th row. Now what I'll do is I'm actually going to create a pivot table first, because that will do the counting of my information. So I'll go to Insert and click Pivot Table. This is on PC. If you're on a Mac, I believe the pivot table is under the Data tab. So when I hit Pivot Table, it's going to ask, oh, where do you want to put it? I will go ahead and have it on a new worksheet. And when you click OK, now I have my pivot table ready to go. Let me zoom in just a bit. So here you see on the right-hand side are the pivot table fields. We want to create a table using our bed type. So I'll go ahead and click on bed type and drag it into my rows. So you can see now all the different types of beds are provided here on the left side. And I want to, again, drag my bed type into values. And in this case, Excel defaulted to count, which is correct. We want to count the number of beds. And with that, we now know how many air beds, how many couches, how many futons, or real beds and sofas are in my Montreal Airbnb listings. And I didn't have to count it by hand, which saves me a lot of time. So with this information, I can now create a pie chart because I'm looking at parts of the whole. Alternatively, you could argue and do a bar chart as well. Perhaps let's do both charts and see which one makes more sense. So if I select all my data, go to Insert, and select Pie Chart, we can see my pie chart types here. Now I'll make it a little bit bigger, and I'll move my title up here. We want to call this Montreal bed types. I want to make this a little bit bigger so I can move this towards the center. And it might be helpful if I add labels, although I've got my legend over here to the right. And as you can see, it looks a bit awkward here. So what I would probably want to do is also format my data series, which will actually let me change the angle. See how I moved right here on the right hand side? It lets me move the angle of my pie slices just a bit. So this way, now I'm slightly at an angle, and I can pull out my numbers a little bit further for easier reading. So we can see right there. And perhaps I want to, if we go back to formatting our data labels, I want to include the percentage as opposed to the value, right? So now I can see it in percents. And I also want the category name. But now we can see that that will affect how my labels look. And so you can move it a little bit here so it's easier to see. And so because my airbeds and my couches are such a low number, it does say 0%. So that's how we would do a pie chart using our pivot table information. Let's go ahead and do the same thing again, but for a bar chart, because I'm curious, but maybe a bar chart would be a better idea for showing what kinds of beds Montreal has in its Airbnb listings. So I'll go Insert, and I'm going to look for my bar chart option. And as you can see, this is what a bar chart would look like. So now that I've compared, the pie chart makes more sense. Not only by definition, where the pie chart tells us parts of a whole, and so each of our types of beds is parts of the whole listings in Montreal. It's just also easier to see visually in comparison to our bar chart here. And so that's what you'll want to do for the Part 2 assignment. In our discussion board prior to Part 2 being due, you'll actually want to share some of your descriptive statistics with your group. That way they can provide feedback on perhaps how to work with your labels or colors, or if you had two kinds of charts, which one works better. And if you have any questions, just let me know.